All righty. Emily Feikls is in the house. Cake Bae. ATX Cake Bae.
Yes.
I did some digging on you, and there's a story way beyond ATX Cake Bae.
Yeah.
And if you go to Emily's Instagram, you'll see like there's a guy talking about blending up one of your cupcakes and like drinking it, and he would do it. And we're going to get to all of that because these things are insane. I tried one for the first time the other day. But I think it's super important when someone's starting a business, whether this is like going to be a full-fledged business for you or whatever it turns into, there's always like the story behind it that gives people buy-in. You also run a podcast. And I think you have a lot to offer when it comes to the backstory and why you're passionate about this. So I'd love for you to just, wherever you want to start, kind of share your journey, your story getting here. And then we'll talk about these absolutely insanely good cupcakes.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. You're referencing my one testimonial video from my friend with the blending it up. But yeah, I mean, where this all really started, there's so many ways, but ultimately, like growing up, I loved to bake. It was something, my mom and I always did. It was such a joy for me. I was the kid doing like easy bake oven creations all the time. And my birthday parties, we'd be like baking things and whatnot. So it's always been a love of mine. And then, just growing up, lots of things started happening. There were experiences and grief and trauma and just this like long segment of my life where I sort of fell away from a lot of the things I loved, and I wasn't cooking and I wasn't baking. And then over time, I sort of found my way back to it, and it became this just like soothing act for me to be in the kitchen, whether I was cooking or baking or creating. And so it was like this really cool moment of reconnecting with it and be like, oh yeah, I've always loved this. I love it. And then I started developing these like health issues, and we can dive into like anything more you want in a bit, but overall, like the health issues made me pivot and get to this point where like the way I used to eat and the way I used to cook and bake, I could no longer do given just what was coming up. So I pivoted and I started doing all gluten-free and all dairy-free. And that was just sort of it. It was just this thing I did on the side. Life continued on, went to college, left college, came home, started my Instagram, started the podcast. And all along had this through line of like really loving to cook and bake. And I used to share recipes all the time. And then a few years after, moved to Austin, and all that sort of like fell to the wayside. Got caught up in just trying to like make it work out here, working all the time, being super busy, and just once again falling out from that like love of mine of being in the kitchen. And so about a year ago exactly, in May of 2023, it was my friend's birthday. She's gluten-free, dairy-free. I couldn't find like a layer cake to what I wanted to have for her birthday. And I was like, wait, I can do this. Like I've always been the baker. So I got in the kitchen and I baked it. Everyone loved it. And that's just like where everything started. And from there, more and more requests came in. Then it was like, oh, you've got to start selling these to more people. And that's like a very, very abridged version of how it started and where we're at today.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a lot of businesses do start like that, where you are kind of doing something you're passionate about and don't even want it to be a business. Like you were doing it because you were in a pinch and needed a dessert.
Yeah.
And then once you get that social proof, the testimonials come in and people are like, you could actually get paid doing this.
Yep.
But there's a big shift to go from just doing it as a hobby to doing it and maybe making money. This isn't your full-time, like you're Correct. A year into doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say even like 6 months, it was in January that I finally admitted like, oh, this could be a business.
Got it.
So it was like really only since January that I was started to make that shift into like, oh, there's more here. There's more to uncover.
Okay. And going back to some of the issues that led to this, I feel like today it's so in our faces with gluten, with dairy, with all these chemicals that are in our foods. Go back to that, like when that started to change and how it affected you.
Yeah. I think there's like a few moments when that came up, but the big catalyst really was growing up. My mom struggled with cancer for like most of my childhood. And then when I was 10, she passed away. And I went into this like massive spiral of all these emotions, not knowing how to navigate them, and getting this sort of like obsession with being healthy. I was like, I can't get cancer. I need to figure out like whatever I can do to stay healthy. And so as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, I was going down these rabbit holes of like chemicals in the food and what you should be eating and cancer fighting agents and all these things. And which was great, right? Like it really helped me shift my health and get to a better state of health until like it went too far. And then I kind of got in that extreme world of like cutting everything out. And that was that season where I like really did step away from cooking and baking because I was just like, I was so afraid of the chemicals in the food and of eating gluten and of eating dairy. And I had health issues starting to arise where like a lot of foods weren't settling well for me. So it's cool because now I'm in this place where like I have a deep appreciation for using whole food ingredients and like eating foods that fuel my body and leave me feeling good. And the entire essence of like what I do today is that I still think we all need to have like the joy and the satisfaction of like a sweet treat. So I'll still get comments from people like, you know, that I don't know if I use cane sugar, if I use XYZ ingredients. I'm like, I completely get that and I understand. And I've been in places where like I couldn't eat those foods or I wouldn't let myself eat those foods. And I like know how much more amazing, exciting, and lovely life is when you allow yourself to have these like sweet treats. And I just so happen to also still have to be gluten-free, dairy-free. So I'm like, okay, let's make like a healthier variation of those. So it really started from this place of like fear and obsession with health and scarcity and like trying to take it all away, and then finding my way back to it over the years and finding ways to like make it work for my health issues and other health issues too. Like you said, like this is all in our faces nowadays because like there is an issue, you know, there is an overabundance of chemicals and fake ingredients and all these things in our food system. And like we're only given one life, so it's not to be lived in fear, I don't believe. So it's like finding that middle ground of better for you, feel good products and items and foods, and not living in a like super strict scarcity mindset.
Well, it's interesting because I had someone on the podcast, Bill Murphy. He started a drink called Willpower, and it's like, he says like better for you drinking. And it's having that same mindset. Like you could completely just cut out alcohol and say, I don't want alcohol in my life, and that's perfectly fine. But if it's something that you enjoy, whether socially or you like the taste or you like the way it makes you feel for a while, finding ways to maybe just do it a little healthier. It's important to not cut all those things out of your life. So I saw on your sticker the other day, it said, better for you baking. And for you, it's, what's crazy is you had this like unhealthy relationship with food that started by something to be healthy. Like I want to be more healthy. And then it created this unhealthy relationship with food. And I would imagine, was cooking and baking for you like a form of therapy in a sense?
1000%. And that didn't really click for me until the past, honestly, like 2 years, when I started to do a lot of work with like nervous system regulation and different therapy and healing modalities. And I started to realize like, oh, cooking is a form of like processing for me. And it's like a form of creating and being in the kitchen. And there's like this Instagram audio that's going around lately where it's like all this noise and commotion in the mind, right? And then people pick like what it is that calms that noise in their mind. And for some, it's the gym or dancing or singing or whatever it is. And for me, like that's being in the kitchen. And so it's really cool because cooking and baking really is supportive for me and like helps me process and just be in my own way. And in turn, like it gets to be like a service and a gift to others when I'm like cooking for them and I'm baking and I'm like creating this thing, whether it's for myself or others. So it's been really fun to just lean into that and explore it.
Yeah. And we all look for that like thing that we can do to escape. And what's great about this, like I saw you post something the other day that said you were experimenting with new flavors. I think it was like a cookie something.
Yes.
What was it?
Probably, I mean, I've been experimenting with a couple things, but experimenting with like different cookie cupcake flavors and seasonal like fruits and jams. And like, I'm just always loving to try new combinations of things. But
so or I guess my version of that, in real estate, but also enjoy like the content creation and always thinking of new videos, new video ideas, ways to capture people's attention. So for you, that's coming up with new flavors and testing and trying. And what does your environment look like when you're cooking right now?
That's a good question. Typically, well, I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess I just basically have like all my ingredients out. My kitchen counters are like cleared off, ready to go, because I'm doing it all from home right now. It's very early stages. But then I usually just have either like a podcast on or music on, and I'm just like going with it. And I kind of get in this like flow state. And a lot of my baking, cooking, kitchen creations are like intuitive. So yes, like I follow a recipe, but then I'll just sort of think like, oh, it'd be really cool if I added in some like clove or a little bit of ginger or this fruit with this and whatever it is. So it really is this like fun, creative place for me. And then in that too, like I get to create the content, and that's something I'm trying to step more into, where I'll be baking or I'm about to start frosting. I'm like, oh, this flavor combination would be so cool to promote. Or like this frosting, like the texture is perfect. I should like film myself frosting, or like this sprinkle effect, whatever it is. Yeah. So it is this like creative playground for me, really. And I love it. And I always joke, I'm like, they're high vibe baked goods, but it's true. Like I feel like I get in such a good space when I'm baking and cooking that I don't know. I'm like, it has to carry through to the baked goods somehow.
Yeah. Well, no, that's like any product you're creating or any finished product, whether it's the final video or something, like your energy, what you put into it typically comes across.
Yeah.
So what do we have here?
Here we have...
You brought me a sample.
I did.
I wish it was like 3 dozen samples, but you did bring 3 dozen the other day to our event, which is amazing.
Got you guys a little variety.
People loved them.
So what
do we have here?
This one's the chocolate chip cookie cupcake. And then I did a peanut butter buttercream with sprinkles.
Oh my God.
And the inspo for this was just like, I don't know. I love cookies, but I always wish they were like, there's more, like kind of needs to be 2 cookies stacked in one, like thicker, slightly different texture. I've always loved like cookie cake creations. So I actually started by creating a cookie cake, and then thought like this needs to be more shareable, like something I could take to events, whatever. So I created the cupcake version. And then hopefully you like peanut butter, but my idea is who doesn't love peanut butter unless you've got the allergies. So
the sweet and salty for me is like
1000%.
That's my thing. I love, my daughter knows, if you ask her, Reese's peanut butter cups are my favorite.
Those
I don't have a fork or a knife or a napkin here, but I kind of want to get the live reaction from it. So while I'm like taking a bite of this, what other, you said like whole ingredients and you're very careful with that. I know seed oils are a big thing right now. So what are some of the differentiators in your cupcakes, cakes, cookies that make it better for you?
Different. Yeah. I think, like I said before, just sort of this like whole foods approach. So once again, I don't want to like demonize or fear food, any of the foods or ingredients, but there are just ones that I prefer cooking and baking with. So when it comes to like sweeteners, using as many natural sweeteners as possible. So whether it's maple syrup, coconut sugar, or sometimes like a little bit of organic cane sugar if need be. And then using things like avocado oil and almond flour and coconut yogurt, and just really like keeping things as natural and basic as can be. I think oftentimes, I mean, this can portray to so many things in life, but we get that like overcomplication of things. And it's like, the mentality of like more is better, but I truly do think that sometimes things are best when you strip them down to the most like basic ingredients possible. So when I was developing the recipes, I just kept tweaking and tweaking until I found like the most basic yet delicious like creation combination I could use with ingredients. So yeah, that's kind of like what sets it apart, I think, and what I'm really trying to market them and myself as is this just like different approach to baking that anyone could do, but a lot of people don't want to do. So that's why you hire me.
Yeah. And when you're looking at the price tag of this versus like what you find at HEB that you're bringing to your kids' class.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different, but you need to understand if people don't want that, then they're not going to buy this. But appreciating what goes into it, the ingredients, the time, the effort, the creativity is all what makes it worth it. So, all right, let's take a live bite.
Give it a live taste test.
I mean, how is it like not dry at all?
I have like such a pet peeve against dry baked goods. Like the
My
amount
God.
of dry gluten-free baked goods I've eaten in my life, I've just sworn that I would never create something that would be that. So yeah, I really try hard for the moisture factor.
My wife, I told you, like, that's how I found you, is because she saw you on Instagram and sent me, and she was like, I want these. She's brought, or I've gotten her gluten-free stuff, or she's, come home with stuff. And that's usually the issue, is that I don't like it because it's dry and it just has a different taste. But if you're listening to this, like, go to her site now. Plug your site while we're just talking about it.
ATX Cake Bae. Well, it might be Cake Bae soon if I remove the ATX. But either way, Cake Bae. Look it up and you'll find it.
CAKEBAE.
Yes.
These things are insane. And can someone get like one cupcake right now, or it's like a half dozen? Or
so that's what I'm working to figure out right now, is that this all really started as just sort of like online, it's birthday party, whatever it is. So it all started doing layer cakes. So people would order those for events, birthdays, whatever it was. And then I started doing the cupcakes. And now it's to this point of like, oh, I just want one cupcake. Where can I get that? And so right now I stock them at Kuya, which is like a local biohacking wellness center. But it's on the docket for 2024 to find more ways that I can provide just like one cupcake without having like a running supply in my personal fridge or, whatever it is. So yeah, like people can order half dozen, a dozen or more if they want through my site and through Instagram. But the singular cupcake right now is only available at Kuya, and I'm working to find more places I could like stash those and have that available. But we'll just see what this year brings for it. But.
Yeah. So Emily and I met last weekend in person at an event. We did like a client appreciation event, and she, came out and provided cupcakes. So like doing more, I'm sure you do a lot of stuff like that where you're passing out cupcakes or giving samples. And you usually post about like where you're going to be on Instagram. Yeah.
And so that's like another way people could get singular cupcakes and whatnot. But yeah, the goal for this year is to just find more places to stock them, provide them, more events to be with, more ways to just like get out there. But Instagram has been like a great tool for just showing people like where I'll be, where they can get them, different flavor options, whatever. So it's really become my like number one platform for promoting and marketing and sharing all of the goods for it.
Yeah. I got asked recently, like if I was to start over my account from zero, starting with real estate, what would I do differently? And it's something that you do really well, is documenting the journey.
Yeah.
Because people, again, they have more buy-in for when this becomes a big brand and maybe a nationwide name. People will be like, oh, I used to go to her house and eat them right out of her kitchen, So you do that really well with documenting, just talking about like, even if it's just showing you making the cupcakes or the frosting or whatever. And with that, you do a lot with when I started clicking on all because you have a lot of links on your Instagram.
Yeah.
So it starts with ATX Cake Bae, and then it goes to your name, and then it goes to your podcast. Let's Let's Thrive.
Yeah.
Corey's the guy who runs this is We Strive. So
I love it.
Let's Thrive with Emily Feikls. And it seems like that's a place where you make yourself very vulnerable. Kind of pour out whatever you're thinking or self-help tips. And I don't know if you want to talk about that podcast at all, because I think it could be a great resource for people. You've been doing it I went back, you have like over 200 episodes, I think.
Yeah.
You've been doing it since 2019?
I think so, because it's been about 5 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2019. I think I launched it in like January of that year. So yeah, it's been well, it's cool because everything I'm doing now with Cake Bae, I sort of like learned and intuitively picked up from building a podcast and from building like my personal page as well, which I started all that, in 2019, about 5 years ago now, when there was this like big surge of everyone having food accounts and Instagrams. And I was just going through a really transitional, challenging time of my life where, I had grown up with this idea of what my life would look like and that I would follow this path and it would be like A, B, C, D. And then I went to college and was having these health issues come up, like new ones, and had started listening to all these podcasts that were giving me information that I had never like heard before. I was from small town, middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and I'm listening to people talk about like all of these job and healing modalities and work things. And it just started to open my mind to so much more. And so I went to college and within a few days was like, this is not it for me. I saw how things would unfold if I like stayed down that trajectory. And I was like, I just don't want that. So I came home and just started working odds and ends jobs. And then in the meantime, I was like, hey, well, I need something that like fuels my fire, like fills my cup, something to sort of give me that like purpose and passion in life. And I was like, well, what if I started a podcast? Like I kind of like lonely living where I do. I want to connect with people. I have all these like thoughts and stories to share. And that's what really inspired me to start a podcast and with that, like grow my Instagram. And I think without realizing it, I was doing what you were just mentioning. Like I was documenting this process of going from, 1 episode, 2 episodes to 50 episodes and sharing the downloads and sharing the guests and really like documenting this journey along the way. And it was all very like natural and intuitive. I didn't have any knowledge or training of like how to build a brand or build a successful, like do a launch or anything, but I just sort of followed like what was in front of me. And that led to the next thing and the next thing. And so it became this place for me to interview guests or share solos, whatever it was. And just, be really vulnerable and open because I was listening to podcasts and I was following people online that were doing that. And it was so supportive for my journey. And I, in a sense, wanted to like repay that and be that for someone else. So it just really all unfolded like really naturally and built a community and is really like the reason I'm here today. It all connected me to the right people and the right opportunities. And I just kept going with it. So it was this sort of beautiful thing. Like one thing led to the next, to the next, to the next. And now I'm here. Yeah.
And that's what I've seen. This podcast has been about a year in the running, but it was very inconsistent the first year. Lately, the past couple months, we have a set space. Now I'm rolling and it like feels good because I'm connecting with different people each week. And before this, I had a podcast in 2019 with a couple friends of mine, and the concept was similar to this, which is highlight people that are doing great things in Austin. That could be people starting a food business. It could be food truck owners, whatever, small business owners, entrepreneurs. And we always said, like, we just got to keep recording. Because after episode 1, you're like, one person downloaded it. It's like you sent it to your parents and they downloaded it. And then you keep going and it's so many. We started looking up I started looking into other podcasts and it was like, after episode 5, done. After episode 12, done. So it's commendable that you've not only started it, and it was probably in a place where it sounds like you were almost like lost with like where you want to be or what you wanted to do. So this was your way of just like, maybe this will bring me some answers.
Yeah.
And it's super important to like stick with it. And now that you're a couple hundred episodes in, it sounds like you've learned so much. And when you say it got you where you are today, like it's amazing that little stepping stone has turned into this.
Yeah. Well, it is cool. Like there's been a lot of things I've started and stopped over my life and over time. But for some reason, that podcast and Instagram and a few other things, I've just stuck with it. And it is fascinating to like look at the stats and see. And that being said, I always recommend if someone wants to start a podcast, just like do it. It's such a fun and amazing learning opportunity, as I'm sure you know. Like you learn so much about yourself, you overcome so many insecurities, you learn about others. It's a connection point. Like you never know who you're going to talk to or meet, whatever it is. So I think it's just such a fun like thing to do. But yeah, I think like what the podcast really taught me and where I've like now applied it in like this season of life and more recently is like, and also, so I read this book earlier this year called The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life, I think it was. I don't know if you've read that before. I love it. Highly recommend it. But part of the essence of it is that like this, guy lives in Africa. His family has this big like preserve where they have all the wild game and animals. And he's comparing like what it takes to track a lion to like the track of life, right? And where like at any point you can definitely like give up and turn around, especially when the tracks start to vanish and like the little things keeping you going, start to go away. Or you can just like stick with it and ultimately get like what you've always been looking for. Or it might come out in a different way. Or like you're following these tracks and you're doing everything and suddenly like the tracks take a turn and you're going west instead of south, whatever it is. And I think that's what the podcast taught me, where similar to what you were saying, like, yeah, some episodes got no downloads. And I was so ready to quit and drop off of it. And then one would get a few more downloads. And I was like, okay, I'm going to keep with the momentum. And then I do more and more. And then like I started noticing that solo episodes were doing better than guest episodes. So I started pivoting in that way. And so it just taught me over time, like this art of like following the little like tracks or the nudges or the pivots and the shifts and seeing like what connections I'd make or what I would learn or topics we discover, whatever it was. And so I think like whether it's podcasting or creating a mini business or any of these like pursuits in life where it might feel like a bit of a challenge, but it like ultimately is like pushing and nudging you to grow. It's such a beautiful thing to just like start and stick with it as long as you can and ride that momentum, while also knowing like when there might be seasons to like step back or reevaluate or reset, right? And that's where I'm at now, where it's like the past few months I have taken a break from podcasting. I've had seasons of on and off with it, but that's usually because other things are coming through. And the last few months, like my focus and energy and all creation has been going towards like Cake Bae. So it makes sense. But yeah, overall, it's just amazing like what lessons you can learn from pursuing something like a podcast or a mini business or even a new hobby.
Yeah. And when you talk about like the escape of cooking, baking, doing this, like how often do we get opportunities in today's world with so many distractions to sit and have a 30-minute, hour-long conversation completely uninterrupted? Like, when does that happen?
Never.
It doesn't. And the solo episodes you do. For someone, I've never done that. I've done solo episodes. I did them previously just like talking about maybe like an article I saw, just like kind of speaking my thoughts about it. But your solo episodes seem to be like your diary.
Yeah.
Like that, your journal, you're taking everything inside your head, inside your heart, and just like letting it out there for people to, maybe it resonates with them, maybe it doesn't. How has that specific, like this, you said the solo episodes, not only were you getting more traction, so the vanity metrics were there, but for you, how has that helped you?
I think it's just been the ultimate like self-discovery and reflection tool, because I think I spent a lot of my life doing the complete opposite. Never sharing like what I felt, never sharing things in my mind, always like masking and hiding and not letting people in. And granted, right, like doing so via podcast is pretty easy. I'm in my room or my office space alone and I'm talking into a mic and I'm not thinking about who's listening to it. I'm just thinking about like, okay, if this is on my heart, it must be on the heart of another. And what I also realized over time is that a lot of the episodes that almost felt like too vulnerable to share, I'd ultimately share them and they would get so many like replies and feedback. And yes, like there's definitely a vanity marker there of like, cool, people like that. Let's do more. And it would be like reading these comments and messages from people of just like, oh my gosh, I've been going through this too. And it almost seems like too specific to be true, but I've just learned over time that like we all are so much more connected than we realize. And oftentimes what we think we're going through and we feel so alone in, so many others are moving through it just in their own version, their own variation. And so it just felt like my way of being there for people and supporting people from afar and from a distance, while also like being so healing for me, because being able to share those thoughts and feelings and experiences in a microphone and have hundreds to, if not more, like thousands of people listen and resonate with that was just like healing for this part of me that never did that before, never got to like share her piece and share what she was going through. And then in turn, it's like also supporting others. So it became this like mutually beneficial relationship where it's healing and supportive for like my personal growth and development, and it's providing a resource and sort of this like safe space for others to go as well. But it was definitely like it took a while to get to that level of comfortability, and I don't think it's for everyone. And there are definitely seasons of my life where like I don't share what's going on in my mind, and I have started to like hold some things sort of like sacred and special to me. Mm-hmm. But overall, I really do see the value in like if I feel comfortable being that vulnerable, like I'll do it.
Yeah. And I think one of the tough things with doing that is you might have gotten 10, 20, 30, 50 comments from people, but there's also so many more people who listened to it, felt something, it affected them, and you don't hear that. Mm-hmm. You know, so often we need that positive feedback, the reinforcement to know that like, and I used to be an elementary school teacher. So that like on an ultimate scale, you know, I've even to this day will have students that I taught 10 years ago. Yeah. Like reach out to me, they'll find me on Instagram or email and just be like, hey, how are you doing? Like, thank you. It's so good to find you. And just little nice messages. But the other hundreds that I taught, never heard anything from. And you know that you have an effect on them in some way. Some will never remember you when they leave. But I think that for me with the podcast especially, like I've loved connecting with people because like even just talking to you, you're so much more than someone who makes like the most insane cupcakes ever. And even just someone listening to this, then they go and check your podcast out or check your life-changing desserts out, and like they're affected, and I might not ever hear of it from it, and you might not ever. Yeah. But it's still affecting people in positive ways. And really that's what like this show is all about, is getting people to have messages that resonate beyond just the two of us. Did you ever feel like when you were starting, did you ever feel that like imposter syndrome? Do you know that term?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I feel like I had that before I kind of knew what imposter syndrome was before I even started the podcast and stuff. And then I was like, okay, this could be a good way for me to sort of work through that and practice it. But it's just funny, right? Because as with most things in life, you'll feel like you mastered it or you like overcame it in one area, and then you start fresh or you start somewhere new and you're like, wow, right back where I was before, you know? And I feel like with the podcasting, like years of podcasting, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't really get the imposter syndrome anymore. But then it comes to baking, right? And it's a whole new thing for me. And suddenly I'm like talking with people one-on-one, or I'm at a market and I feel the imposter syndrome. Or like a year or two ago, I started getting into the world of like being a personal and virtual assistant. And like I knew I was capable of it. I knew I could do everything. And yet like imposter syndrome just like flared through me. And then I worked through that. So I feel like it's just something like it's this continual like growth cycle, and something that'll always pop up when I'm starting something new. But what's cool is that like, I guess when it first started coming through those years back, it felt so like impossible, and it felt like I was just like going through the trenches with it. And now, as with like a lot of things, just the awareness is there of like, oh, like this is here, this is the beginning stage, pretty soon I'm gonna be over it. It's just like a matter of working my way through it and like using the tools and like knowing what I need to do to like sort of be with it, work through it, and move on to the next stage. So I feel like that's like a cool thing about having multiple like projects or experiences or creations right now, is that I'm like, okay, I've been here and I've done this. It's just like a new season of it, and like, how do I move through it?
Yeah. So did I see you're also like a chef, like a private chef?
Yeah, that's something I started in the fall as well. I just started doing like meal prepping for a few friends, and then I did sort of like private cooking for a few retreats and events, and now I'm in this season of just kind of like seeing what comes my way. But I love doing that sort of like personal chef, personal meal prep, like whatever it is, as well as like the personal assistant work. I have these like multiple loves of mine where I love being in the kitchen and creating and having that like personal approach to someone's own like health and wellness needs. And I have this like logical, business oriented like marketing side of me that I love to portray through like the VA and PA work. So I feel pretty grateful that I can like do all these different lines of work while building something of my own as well. So it's like a cool playground for all my different skill sets.
Yeah, I feel like that's the beauty of social media, of life these days, is that I feel like you have more support outlets to be able to start a passion project, whether it's finding jobs online or part-time work or social media content creation. Like there's so many different things out there that you could do to supplement income while you work on launching this. So ATX Cake Bae, or what might eventually turn into just Cake Bae if we go
bigger
national with this. What do you see it looking like? You said this year it's get into places where people can try it. It's proof of concept this year.
Yeah.
What do you see this turning into? Is this like a baked by Melissa? Do you know that?
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure she was just cooking them out of her apartment, same thing. And then when people realize they're insanely good, it blows up.
Yeah.
While you're telling me this, I wasn't going to take another bite, but I need to. One more. I need some of that.
I love it.
Icing.
Yeah. I love it. I'm not 100% sure. And I think there's a really cool like beauty in that, because I just did a post about this actually, but for a lot of things in my life and a lot of my life, I've been so regimented of like, this is the end goal and this is the big picture and it's going to go from like here to here to here. And with this like baking business, I mean, in January, like I said, this past fall, I didn't even want to share on Instagram. Like I kept telling people, I was like, this isn't a business. This is a side project. Like, I don't want to grow it, blah, blah, blah. And then December, January, I'm like, people want it. So I started expanding. I started to accept like, oh, this could be a business. And now it's just at the point where like the potential and the opportunity to grow is there. I just get to decide to like what extent or what way I want to take it. And it's interesting because I've been getting a lot of, suggestions and thoughts, and there's the way that I see, there's like this stereotypical path that I see I could take, right? Where it's like, I grow in this way and then here, and then I have the brick and mortar and then blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, that's all cool. That's what people are saying and whatnot. Like, what do I want? And like, what actually makes sense for like the life I want to live? Because ultimately, if I don't want to be tied to a brick and mortar in Austin, then like, why would I put everything in and grow in that direction? So where I've been in the past few weeks, and I think I'll probably take like the next few weeks to sit with too, is like, in what ways do I want to grow? Because I think there's ways to grow and expand that don't involve like the typical ways that I've just always known to or seen to be true, So I'm sort of seeing how I can maybe like twist this in my own way of like growth and expansion. And I've always kind of done that with like everything in my life. I like don't want to follow what's like the usual path for it. So I don't know for sure, but like, yeah, this year I think it's just like getting into more events, getting into more local spots in Austin, and just like sort of like raising the level like bit by bit to see like how big I want to take it or how much I want to grow it, and the capacity to which I want to take it to. So
What are some of the, like, what are people telling you should do?
It's like so many, like brick and mortar, like they want like a, well, they're like
From apartment to brick and mortar.
yeah, I'm like, okay, let's see. That, and then just a lot of like shipping, like a lot of people outside of Austin, which is cool because like I have a very engaged online like community, and so I've gotten a lot of support and feedback of people that don't live in Austin and they want it, or I've had a lot of people fly in for like events and retreats where I have Cake Bae or I've cooked. They're like, oh, I want this like back home. Like, can I order? I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
So it's something like that where I'm like, I'd honestly be more interested in figuring out like the shipping and the expansion process in that regard versus like focusing on a brick and mortar. Or, maybe it's not like creating a brick and mortar bakery, but more so this like bigger picture, like collaboration with another business or health and dive or whatever it is. Yeah. So I'm sort of open to like whatever comes next. And right now, like I'm very content with like my other work passions and like the way it's growing as it is. So I'm just sort of leaving it up to life to see like what opportunities come my way. Yeah. But definitely still listening to like what the people are asking for. So.
Yeah, it's great to get recommendations, and you could just, write them down, filter through what works. But I think what you have going for you is that you have multiple experiences in your life of doing things and maybe wearing yourself out with them, or getting so obsessed over it that you lose the joy in doing it, to where you can go at your own pace with this. And you never want it to get to a place where then you start resenting what it is that you loved in the first place. Yeah. And building this big thing, and now you're running a business. It's not even about the cupcakes anymore. It's just now I'm managing people and finances and a lease and all that stuff. It's tough. Not saying that you're not going to eventually do that. Like that might be where your life takes you, but I definitely think I appreciate the fact that you're right now just like open to it. Yeah. And people harp on like having 2-year, 5-year, 10-year goals. And it's great to like maybe have it down on paper and see a big picture so you know what you're working toward. But also for you, it's like, I don't know what I want. What I want this to look like in 5 years. Yeah. 10 years.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, I think it is, I've just had enough experiences where it's everything can change so quickly. Yeah. And I've seen how like getting so hyper fixated on like that one goal or the one mark or whatever it is, like 1 year, 2 year, 5 years from now, like it can all change in an instant. And so it's really been this lesson of like, how can I just like, what feels good right now, right? And like you said, like right now, I really enjoy the baking. Like, I don't know if I want to be in that like level of business quite yet. So it is just sort of like going with it and walking with it along the way and seeing how I want it to grow. But it's just very interesting to see like the life lessons and the correlations that come from any sort of business creation project. But just kind of taking it at a different pace.
Yeah. So quickly run through, this is the chocolate chip peanut butter. At our event the other day, you brought it was a chocolate blackberry pistachio.
Nice. Yeah.
That was mine. Like that was my favorite.
Okay, good.
And that was a new one for you. That
was a new, I was like baking that morning. I knew I wanted to create a chocolate cupcake for y'all. And, or I was frosting. I was like, just thinking about like different chocolate flavor variations. Like, oh, I have blackberry, I have pistachio. I was like, that would be really cool. So I just like went for it. Yeah. Which I'm so happy y'all gave me like creative freedom.
Oh, for sure.
In that regard.
Yeah. I was like, do your thing. We had a blueberry lemon.
Yeah.
That was, my wife was like, I could eat like 10 of these right now. And then you brought the sprinkle one, but or a funfetti you called it?
Mm-hmm. They were the cookie cupcake, but with vanilla and sprinkles. So like a funfetti cookie cupcake. Okay. But
what else do you have? Like, what are some of your other top flavors, just for people listening to this to know like what they can get? Obviously they can go look at your site, but some of the cupcakes, and then you do regular like 6-inch and 8-inch cakes. Yeah. And then cookies, right?
Yeah, the cookies I'm launching, but I'll probably have them out like in a week or so from now. But yeah, I do like layer cakes, so there'll be like the cake stacked with a jam or a frosting middle and more frosting, and then I do the cupcakes, cookies in a few weeks. But overall, like I have some pretty common, like simple flavors that I always stick with. So like blueberry lemon, strawberry, raspberry lemon, cookies and cream, peanut butter chocolate. I've been loving playing with pistachio lately. Traditional like funfetti with like vanilla or chocolate and sprinkles. Trying to think what else I've done. Blueberry orange, strawberry orange. I did a pineapple ginger cake that was really good. It was just like
I would
a nice.
never think to.
Yeah, I was inspired.
Yeah.
I was in Costa Rica this past fall, and I came back, and I used to love pineapple upside down cakes growing up. So I did a really cool pineapple. That was the cake, that review you were, or the testimonial you mentioned earlier.
Blender.
That was the cake. Yeah, he was like, I would blend this up and bathe in it. He's extra, but yeah. So those are just some of the flavors. Oh, I've done like orange clove, orange chocolate. I love it. It's like a creative playground for me.
Yeah.
So I typically I have flavor suggestions on my site and Instagram, but I also love if somebody's like, hey, I'm thinking like this and this. I'm like, cool, let's pair it like this. Like I've done, strawberry matcha, blueberry matcha. I did an ice cream cake recently, so that'll be new on the menu.
I messaged you.
Yeah, for your birthday. Yeah, we got to do that this summer.
Yeah, as soon as Emily posted that, I replied with the day of my birthday, so she knows
on the cal.
when to have it ready for me.
Get that prepped.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm sure there's so many more I'm forgetting, but I've done like chocolate cherry, chocolate blackberry. So yeah, on and on. Like
Yeah.
I love playing with like more decadent chocolate flavors, and then I love like any fruit combination too. So yeah, kind of do it all. If someone's listening and they like have inspo, like let me know. I love to create and
You're
like
willing to
co-create
take like
with it.
custom or custom ideas. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, to an extent. Like so long as I think it'll actually taste good, like
Yeah.
then we'll go for it.
Yeah, you never want to make something that someone suggests and then it's terrible.
Yeah, or I'll let them know straight up, like, hey, I've never tested this before, so like, this is like, so long as you pay, I'll make it for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of fun to be once again at this stage where like it is so hands-on that I can really have it be a custom personal experience versus having it be like kind of systemized in like an official business. So I'm really just loving this stage that it's in, where I get to have that personal relationship with all the clients too.
How long do these stay good? Do you recommend refrigerating them, like keeping them room temperature?
Yeah, especially here in Austin, like the heat's just so intense. So I'd say in the fridge, they'll last like, I've kept things like up to a week.
Okay.
The moisture is going to like dissipate over time for sure. So I recommend like 3 days is probably optimal freshness from baking. And then, 4 to 7, like it's still going to be really good.
Okay.
It'll just be like, I don't know, might be a little less fresh.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've never had anything stay past like 4 days in my fridge because I'm always eating it or giving it to friends. But yeah, because they are preservative free. So, and then at room temp, like they're just going to get like a little melty, with this heat.
That was the issue we had at our event is that by the end of it, a lot of them just like melted.
Melty, yeah.
I think it's better like this, like room temperature than straight out of the fridge, because we brought some of them home. Definitely ate some of them like straight out of the fridge. Good, but I think you get more of like the experience.
That's so
when
funny.
It's room temperature.
Because I love them like so cold, like
Really?
straight out of the fridge. Like
Okay.
sometimes I'll even put them in the freezer for like 15 minutes.
Ooh,
But I
actually
feel like
wouldn't mind that.
on the other end of the spectrum, they want them at that room temperatureness. So
Yeah.
just all the variations. But
All right, well, I hope we're going to try to get you to more client events and stuff that we do, because selfishly we want them
more.
but also love like getting the word out about what you're doing here.
Thank
Do you
you.
think Austin is like, are you happy Austin is the place you're starting this, or do you still have family up in Northeast?
All my family, still lives in Pennsylvania for the most part, but it's just wild because like quite literally, I never saw this as part of my life plan when I lived there, because this could never be possible back there. Like there's no business, there's no culture, like none of it. And even if I was somewhere like New York or LA, it wouldn't work because there's so many others. I truly believe like I knew I was meant to come to Austin for a reason. And I mean, besides finding like community, all the other good things, I'm like, this is another part of that, because there's just something special about this place where like there's just the fresh open opportunity for it all, and there really isn't that many other options to like the caliber to which I think I'm baking and creating. So I do feel very like happy and excited that this is like where it's all starting. But also, yeah, once again, excited to expand and get it out to more places. So
I feel like it comes up in every episode when I'm talking to someone who's like involved in health and wellness or community here, like how good of a city this is for that and for starting a business. It really is like, yes, it's changed. I've been here almost 11 years. It's gone through a lot of changes, some good, some bad. Every city does, but I still think at the core, the opportunity and the ability to like build and join a community and have the support system here, like all these people now that live here that have been following your story, like they want this to be successful.
Yeah.
I don't even know you that well. And I want this to be successful just because you've got a good product, you've got a great story, and I do whatever I can to help, get this out there and get people buy more cupcakes.
Yeah. Thank you.
So give one more plug, where to find you on Instagram, online, and also your podcast.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Yeah. I'm on Instagram at ATX Cake Bae, which might change to Cake Bae, but regardless, you'll find it on there. And then my personal is also on there at Emily Feikls, which I'm sure we can spell below. But either way, like you'll find the Cake Bae stuff through there. And then my website right now, still on a Canva site. So it's just like linked through my Instagrams for the Cake Bae website. But pretty soon I'll have like cakebae.com under my own domain. So keep an eye out for that. And then the podcast is Let's Thrive. And as I said, I'm in a bit of a season break right now, but there's lots of episodes to listen back to. I'll be starting up again soon enough, I'm sure. So yeah, and I'm just so excited. Like you said, this is such a beautiful like city for community and all of that. So I love connecting with people, and opportunities like this just like mean the world. So thank you.
A lot of what you have on the podcast is evergreen content. So like you can go back, 3 years and still get something valuable. And I don't know how I didn't ask this. People might have stopped listening by now because they might have thought we're done. But where did Cake Bae, where did that name come from?
It's so funny because earlier I almost shared the story, but I lost track of it in my mind. My one best friend, he's this like, my best friend Claire that I started Cake Bae, the cakes for last spring. I didn't have a name for it. I was just baking cakes. Her husband is my best friend. He's just this like big, like super muscular, like fitness guy. And he loves my cupcakes and cakes, like my number one fan from day one. And he was the one that was always like, you got to start a website. You got to start an Instagram. And he was just joking like it should be Cake Bae because one of his favorite memes and Halloween costumes is dressing up as Salt Bae, the guy that would do like the sprinkle. So he's like, you should be Cake Bae. I was like, no, that's stupid. No, blah, blah, blah. And then he kept recommending it and saying it. Okay, I kind of like how it I like the ring of it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll see if there's an Instagram. I'll see if I could like buy a domain. And sure enough, it was open. I was like, I'm just going to go for it. Yeah. So the one night I was driving home and I pull off to the side of the road and I launched the Instagram and I launched the website and I do all of it.
I don't do this right now.
Precisely. I was just like, gotta do it. So that's where Cake Bae was born. And it's just so funny because he jokes he gets like a commission of my business now. He's like, I'm the reason you started. And I'm like, fair. Yeah. But yeah, so that's the origin of the name Cake Bae. So.
Love it. All right. We'll end on that. Emily, AKA the Cake Bae.
There we go.
All right. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.